Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Raquel,
Hi, Eric.
Claudia, David,
Hello.
Lauren, Andrew. Any of you guys remember Romper Room from the 80s?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm not the only one. Dating myself here. Cool. We have a good sized group here. So we'll let folks shuffle in here. I'm kind of new to this Zoom poll thing, but I'm gonna start a poll here. You guys want to take a peek at that while we're waiting? And meanwhile, I will let folks shuffle in and I will do a little bit of talking. And organizing of my windows here. Give me 1 second. Here we go. I'm going to copy something in the chat so I don't have to repeat myself that much. All right, so let's see how many folks we got in here. 10 folks. Okay. 30 plus folks registered for this weekly coffee with me, your esteemed recruiter. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I scheduled 30 minutes for this. I'm going to be doing this weekly. And I think the email that I sent has a little add to calendar. So you should have that on your calendar going forward. If you find value in this, then you're all welcome to join me on a weekly basis here. So let's see. Where do I start? I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I don't want to talk too much about myself. I'm just here to kind of answer questions, from a recruiter's perspective to really enable your job search. But I've been recruiting now for the past 10 years. Prior to that, I was in software product development and product management. I've worked on everything from space satellites to building middleware for enterprise systems to e-commerce to selling digital tickets to online mobile dating and more recently in the past 10 years, talent acquisition. I run a small boutique third-party search firm called Jump Search, and we work primarily with venture-backed startups and growth companies. And so that's kind of where most of my experience and expertise has been in terms of recruiting. But generally speaking, I like to think I can speak pretty intelligently about the mindset, psychology of a recruiter, internal or external, as well as hiring managers, and give you some insights into that black box that is sort of the hiring and recruiting and interview process. With the premise is that if you have a little bit of information about what's going on behind the scenes, it'll help you as a job seeker, manage your expectations, manage your search much more effectively, right? And so that's sort of the premise. My relationship with NSA is I've been a moderator for two JSCs, 476 and 413, over the past 9 months. I've since ramped down from the group since a lot of them have moved on. And I'm still in the recruiting business, but I'm actually pivoting my career a little bit, and would be happy to talk with any of you folks about sort of what that pivot might look like for you as a function of AI, which is what's sort of driving my pivot quite a bit. So without doing any more talking about myself, let's see, we have a group now of 16 folks. If you take a peek at the chat, I dropped in a little bit of information there. I won't read that verbatim, but take a peek at it. If you have any questions, drop questions or raise your hand and I'll get to them. Drop it in the chat or just raise your hand using the hand raising thing in Zoom here. Also, one thing I would love feedback from you is just I put a poll up, so feel free to answer that poll if you're so inclined. And I guess without further ado here, I really just want to jump into answering any questions you guys might have about the recruiting process, about working with recruiters. This is not meant to be, by the way, like a substitute for your JSC. And for those of you that are not, well, I've really only promoted this across the JSC Slack or the NSA Slack. But if there's any folks out there that are not part of NSA or Never Search Alone, a quick plug for that community. They've got like more than 5,000, a community of more than 5,000 job seekers. check out phyl.org, phyl.org. Great community. If you are doing a job search, definitely don't do it alone. Great community. So anyway, I'll just take questions at this point. I don't want to keep talking. So if you want to raise your hand or whatnot, I'll just start with the questions that are here in the chat. Raquel, what is the best way to get legitimate recruiters in industries we are interested in? So a quick comment about recruiters. The bar is super low to become a recruiter, and there's a lot of money in recruiting. And so what I mean by that is the bar is really low. If you have a laptop, if you have a phone, internet connection, and you know how to talk, you can become a recruiter. So the bar is really low, and the industry gets recruiters get a lot of a bad rap, right? Because there's a lot of unscrupulous folks in the profession, unfortunately. The best way to find a legitimate recruiter, I would probably say, is start with a referral. So if somebody that you know and trust has worked with a recruiter that they were very happy with, that they felt was competent and had a certain level of integrity, I would start there. That's probably the best way, word of mouth. And also, all recruiters are not equal. Obviously there's some that are better than others, but recruiters tend to specialize either geographically or by industry or sector, right? And so you want to make sure that you're trying to connect with a recruiter that is in your industry, right? And ideally in your geography. So that would be my quick 1-2 there. Is now not the time to do a career change in role? Jenna. Yeah, right now it's tough. What's happening right now, what I'm seeing is that especially in tech, things are pretty tough. There's an abundance of great talent out there. And if you are moving out of tech, it could be an opportune time to move into something that is sort of growing and maybe has more job openings. And not to bash on tech, but because right now I think we're in a transition, and I think AI is going to be the new platform upon which new startups and new products and new services and a whole new economy is going to build upon this new platform that is AI technology. But we're in transition right now. And so if you're talking about a career change, like from being, for example, a software engineer to, going to start a flower shop, right? It's quite a dramatic change. But if you're looking at staying within tech but maybe pivoting into a different industry, like you've been in SaaS, now you want to move into I don't know, SaaS for healthcare, or move into healthcare tech or something like that. Maybe that's less of a pivot, right? So there's varying degrees of pivots, and I think the important part about a pivot is to really figure out what portable experience you have and really position yourself in that way. You're going to have to do a job in terms of marketing and spinning your narrative when you do a pivot, and you are at a disadvantage. But a lot of people right now are at a disadvantage too, because their roles are actually pivoting. A lot of people's roles are pivoting as a function of AI. It's starting slow right now. And what I mean by that is, if you're a product manager, what it means to be a product manager 2 or 3 years ago is changing what it means to be a product manager today, because AI is changing the definition of that role now. And so you might even be forced into a pivot. A lot of folks are being forced into a pivot in that sense. So hopefully that helps, Jenna.
Yeah.
How does an ATS, is that helpful, Jenna? Any quick follow-up?
No, I mean, you've got me intrigued now when you say that AI may be forcing us PMs to pivot. I was actually thinking about maybe transitioning to solutions engineering from PM, because I feel like the PM function is like oversaturated. I wonder, could I like parallel path a couple of different options? Could I have like different swim lanes and see which one, takes? But that would be a lot of work and effort. But I mean, if I'm trying to be strategic here, it's like where can I go where the odds are better, or in my favor?
Yeah. The job search is tricky, right? It's sort of a game of optimizing your time, right? And I'm not sure, Jen, how long you've been with the JSC or the NSA, but Phil is a big proponent of really just niching down your candidate market fit statement.
Mhm.
And so if you're too broad, or if you have two candidate market fit statements, that's effectively two job searches you're running. You're doubling your effort, in the interest of, increasing your odds by casting sort of a wider net. But it's sort of a case by case basis, and it's a sort of a judgment call you have to make based on your own personal, interests and needs. Hey Kayla, let's see. How does an ATS really work? I seem to be rejected for roles where my qualifications are 100% on point. Not sure if it's an ATS issue. I modify my resume for every role. Yeah, so ATS systems, yeah, that's a good question. So you can think of an ATS system as sort of like a CRM, right? It's a CRM that's specialized for hiring, for recruiters. And it allows them to manage the candidate through different states, right? So typically you have a recruiter that's posting a job, an internal recruiter. Now, there's a difference between an internal recruiter and external recruiter. I happen to be an external recruiter, so I run my own agency and I work with different clients, right? But an internal recruiter, right, they work for the company that they're hiring for, and they're internal. And the other thing too, just not to sidetrack too much, internal recruiters and external recruiters have different incentive structures. So you should be aware of those as you're interacting with internal or external recruiters. But just going back to an ATS, so an ATS is really like a CRM just for hiring and for recruiting, and it manages candidates through the whatever process or stages that they design. When your resume when a job posting is posted, let's say on LinkedIn or Indeed or any of those channels, a lot of times you'll apply and your resume will get sent through LinkedIn into the ATS system. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how ATS systems work, and there's a lot of folks that think that they're getting excluded prematurely from an ATS system by some AI screening bot. The adoption or the implementation of AI screening bots for ATSs is based on my recent sort of just inquiry, is actually pretty low. It's not as prevalent as people seem to think. And so, and I think I talked about this last week. By the way, I've been doing this now for 2 weeks, these office hour coffee hours. And that was one of the questions about, people being concerned about getting prematurely screened out by some AI bot, and should they try to, do this whole optimization exercise with the resume in terms of keywords and this and that. I would say definitely go through that exercise, but you don't have to put too much time in that. Now, I think that will change as time goes on. I think ATS systems will start to incorporate more AI as part of the screening process, or at least the sorting process. In fact, that's something that I'm working on in my own projects right now, using AI to help with that problem. It's a problem for companies right now. They're getting inundated with applicants and resumes.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah. Hey, John.
Yeah, just one point on that. I mean, it's fascinating, right? I mean, so I think it's good to have a conversation. But one of my takes on that for, let's say, introducing new AI and ML components to, let's say, an ATS, is that they may actually be better at, like, they may actually have taxonomies, ontologies that you don't have to specifically match words, right? So it may actually be able to understand your resume more generally. And so it actually becomes a little bit, yes, maybe you want, like, I know we acquired a company, CEB, which is now Gartner. We acquired a small company, Neuron, something that it was trying to, like, for law firms, look at a resume and be like, is this person really going to be successful here? Looking at, like, life cycles. And it would say, hey, this person's not going to be challenged. They're going to leave. So it was like, and it felt a little uncomfortable, but it was trying to, like, basically get a fit. But I kind of feel like if you started to introduce, let's say, natural language processing and, sort of LLM type of stuff, it might actually make it better at understanding your resume without you having to just, like, job scan and copy and paste exact words.
Yeah.
So it could go that way too. But I think one of
Yeah.
the problems with ATS is you're now set up for it to be automated. And so you just got all the spams, like you were mentioning.
Yeah, it's going to be an arms race, right? Like when companies are implementing AI to help them with the recruiting and evaluation and whatnot process, other companies will come up that'll help the candidate, so to speak. But it'll be a little bit of an arms race. And I was joking with a friend of mine the other day. I was like, at some point, you're going to have, a candidate avatar talking to recruiter avatar, and they'll just be talking to each other, and the humans will be here, like, doing what they do. But and I could see that happening to some degree, very quickly. But yeah, I think, I think so, what was it? Maybe who asked about customizing resumes? It takes time to customize a resume, and if you can come up with a quick way. So part of the value that I can add here is giving you the recruiter perspective, right? When I look at a resume, I typically look at the top, and it's a great place to showcase your candidate market fit statement. And it's also a great place to customize the resume with a few bullet points about the accomplishments, your career accomplishments that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. And it also gives you an easy way to customize your resume without having to customize the whole resume, right? And so that could save you time. And a lot of what we're talking about here is optimizing for your time, right? So as a recruiter, when I'm looking at somebody's resume, typically I'll look at the beginning to see if they're, what they're looking for, and if there's just any relevant like marquee career accomplishments that will prompt me to look deeper, right? And that could be just the first section that you can customize across different opportunities that you're applying for. So pro tip, that's something that I wouldn't go and change everything about your resume. And if you find that you're doing that, your candidate market fit statement might not be tight enough, and the jobs you're applying to might be too sort of varied. So for what that's worth. Let's see. Sorry, I'm scrolling here through some of the questions. So hopefully I went deep enough there, Kayla, about how an ATS system really works. Let me see. I seem to be rejected for roles where my okay. So what you were seeing there in terms of being rejected for roles where my qualifications are not 100% on point. So if your qualifications are not 100% on point,
No, sorry, Eric. Where they are 100% on point. Like I
they
feel
are. Okay.
and I can't even get a call.
Yeah, and my gosh, Kayla, it's tough out there right now. It really is. So I guess, first off, know that you're not alone. But part of what we're seeing, and I alluded to this earlier, like recruiter posts a job, they're getting like hundreds of applicants. And what's happening too on the inside, again, is a lot of companies are they're slimming down their own recruiting staff. So, I talked with a friend of mine the other day. He's a hiring manager, and he was complaining about his job it's not getting any movement. So what's happening is like his recruiter is now doing the job of 5 recruiters, right? They've somehow let go of whatever the four out of the 5 recruiters. So his recruiter internally is doing the job of 5 recruiters. So which means he or she probably has, it could be anywhere from like 10 to like even 30 requisitions that the person is working on. It's 30 pipelines that they have to manage. And so so he has like 400 candidates or applicants in his pipeline just for his job. And so he's complaining to me like, how am I going to get through this? Right. So what he's telling me is like, what ends up happening is that the people that he starts looking at are the people that are referred to him. So if you can, so I don't imagine that my friend, the hiring manager, his situation is unique. I think it's pretty common right now. So if you're not getting a call back and you're like, effectively, like you meet every requirement and then some on the job description, it's conceivable that they're not even looking at your resume. And it's probably not anything to do with like getting screened out. It's just that they're not getting screened in because nobody's looking at them because they're just inundated. So what I would recommend is, yes, go to the front door, still apply. But if you can get on the radar of that hiring manager in any way, I would try that angle as well. And there's things that you could do on LinkedIn to try to connect or identify that recruiter or the hiring manager. Ideally, you're connecting with the hiring manager and getting on their radar such that they can, they can kind of endorse you or say, hey, recruiter, check out Kayla. You need to talk to her, right? And so so definitely apply, but don't rely on that. Spend time trying to figure out who you can connect with on the inside, because that's what the hiring managers and the recruiters are going through right now. And so hopefully that gives a little bit of perspective and maybe a little bit of understanding of other angles that you might be able to pursue.
Yeah, thank you. That is very helpful. And something that's a little bit further down is when I've applied to those positions and then I see it repost, it will show like 400 candidates and then it reposts and you're thinking, was there nobody in the first 400? Like my resume was perfect, but you're reposting it again.
Yeah, so I can speculate on what's happening there. The recruiter posts a resume. They post a job description, a job. They get inundated, and then they turn it off. They're like, "Whoa, I have four. It's only been a day. I've got 400 inbound." So they turn the posting off because they feel like, okay, I've got enough inbound. I've got enough pipeline. Certainly, there's got to be somebody in there or a few people in that pipeline that's going to fill the position. But again, what we're finding is that so many of these people that you're effectively competing with in that pipeline are not qualified, and there's a portion of that that's spam as well, right? But the perception on the recruiter side is that, man, 400 is big. That's enough for me. I mean, I don't want to go through more than that. I'll just go through that. Certainly, there has to be. There's the recruiter's assuming that pipeline is now representative of the talent market and is adequate. But what ends up happening, and again, I'm speculating here, is that they turn it off, and then they find that whoever goes through the pipeline, the pipeline is not, the cohorts are not big enough, or nobody even gets an offer out of that 400 people.
Is it reasonable in that scenario, Eric, to so just like trying to reverse engineer? I'm the recruiter, the hiring manager, whatever we're pairing together, we get our 400, we go, all right, some way, shape, or form, I got a couple of referrals, I saw a couple of, I flipped through a couple, I picked 10. Well, then you got to contact those 10. 3 or 4 don't reply. 3 or 4, you set up the interview. So now you got to set around interviews. Then you got to get the feedback. And then, like you say, at the end, either they don't take it or they don't like it, or they're like, hey, let's get another batch of 400. So they're a little bit at the mercy too of the interview process. But it takes time, right, to facilitate the interviewing. And then they go, okay, well, we got to repost it again. Or they post it, they get a feel, and they're like, well, I got to redo it because those people I don't want to go, they may have already moved on. Is that seem logical? Because it just, to me, it's like there's a lot of work to it. I mean, I've hired, it's work.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all interviewed.
And there's that perception that there's so many. I mean, there's an overabundance of applicants. So like, the more applicants you open it up to, that's going to create more work for you as a recruiter or a hiring manager. And so they'll turn it off and think that that's adequate.
Is there any legal responsibility for them to review them, or is that like that's not really a factor?
To review the resumes?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Yeah, I didn't know, maybe if in certain governments thing, because I had one girl that's in my woman that's in my ex Google product manager that's in my JSC, and she was talking to somebody and they were like, yeah, we have like 500 resumes and we haven't even opened it yet. And they're like, we don't want to open it for this exact reason. They're like, we're just going to do it without posting it. We don't want to open it because it's too much work.
Yeah. Wow.
Good problem.
Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that helps, Kayla. And thanks, John, for the input. Let's see. When we are asked for a salary range, how does that impact the initial offer? For example, if a role typically pays 100K and candidate gives a range of 80 to 100K, will that reduce their initial offer? So just a quick comment here about compensation. Like right now, especially right now, the leverage is largely with the employers. And this is something that sort of oscillates back and forth, right? 2 years ago, the leverage was on the candidate side, right? So candidates back then they were writing, I mean, at least in my experience, they were writing their own offers. They were getting multiple offers and they were writing their own offers. And it's very competitive, but again, it oscillates. So you have to look at kind of where we are in that sort of cycle and who has the leverage. But when you're asked for a salary range, how does that impact the initial offer? I guess I'll make a comment about, that's typically one of the questions an interviewer or a recruiter will ask you up front. Most recruiters won't ask you how much you're making. It's kind of like social faux pas, I guess. But they'll ask you what your comp expectations are, right? What are you looking for? What's your comp expectations? And so my recommendation, because when I think about, because I asked that in my first interview, my first screening interview, because I want to make sure that there's some overlap between what I know to be the budget for the role, whether it's disclosed or not, and the expectation of the candidate. And if it's too far off, then we really need to sort of reconsider on both fronts. And I work with the candidate on that, because I don't want to waste their time, and obviously I don't want them to waste. I don't want to waste our team's time, because interviewing is very expensive, right? And so one, I would recommend that you do share a range. Don't just share it flippantly. Like, you should do your research on what is the market rate for the role, right? And I would always recommend giving a range. Yeah, and I think you're on point there, Jeff, about that. I would always recommend giving a range. And maybe part of the question is, does that anchor you, or does that sort of pin you down? Yes and no. I've seen a lot of situations where things evolve over the course of the interview process, right? As you're learning more about the opportunity as a candidate, and as the company's learning more about you, it may be more fluid than you think, right? And so one question you can ask the recruiter is, what is the role budgeted for, right? And sometimes budget is different from what's actually posted as the job compensation. They may post the job compensation as 150, but there may be a larger budget for it. And that's something that sometimes the hiring manager has to sort of escalate to finance or powers that be to get that approved. And I've seen that happen. But again, that's mostly in situations where the leverage is on the candidate's side. Okay. So you have to be sensitive to that. So I guess what you're asking here is, when we're asked for a salary range, how does that impact the initial offer? Okay. So if a role typically pays 100K, I wouldn't necessarily put your range as the top, right? So if I know a role pays, typically a role pays 100K in the market, I would give a range, I don't know, maybe 90 to 110 or something like that, right? And if you make the range too wide, you can lose credibility too, because then you're not really being, you're being a bit disingenuous with the recruiter. Like, if they ask you, senior product manager, what is your range for the role? Oh, my range is 50K to 350K. Like, you'll lose some credibility there, because you're not taking it seriously, right? So hopefully that helps. David, is it beneficial to maintain relationships with third-party recruiters? If so, what are some good ways to maintain those relationships? So going back to incentive structures, right? Third-party recruiters have a different incentive structure than internal recruiters. Third-party recruiters are they're often paid on a commission. They're often they could be working for a small mom and pops like I do, or a larger sort of third-party recruiting organization, right? And so depending on that, they have different incentive structures. So anyway, I would recommend maintaining relationships with good recruiters and you build a relationship with them over time. And if you think about the incentive structures and what's important to third-party recruiters, if they're full desk recruiters, and that term means that they do the marketing in terms of finding clients, but they also do the recruiting in terms of executing on the searches for those clients. What they're interested in is new client development, right? They want to find new clients. They want to find new requisitions. They want to find new requisitions at existing clients, because sometimes that's not always pushed to them, or it's not always obvious. A lot of full desk recruiters, they look for a platform to get exposure either to potential clients, but also to potential candidates, right? And so if there's a way that you can help them with that, I don't know, if you have a following on LinkedIn, for example, and you can give them exposure, they love that, right? So if you look at the incentive structure for external or third-party recruiters, and you can kind of play to that, then it can help you build a relationship. But again, it's not always, you giving, it's like, what can recruiters do for you and what can you do for them when you're not in a job search? And so think about those things. I would definitely recommend you develop relationships when you don't need them. Because I get that a lot. Like, people want to talk to me, but when I want to talk to them and they don't need me because they're happily employed, I would say take calls with recruiters, build relationships with the good recruiters. There is such thing as good recruiters and bad recruiters. And so part of the trick is figuring out who's who and really investing your time in building those relationships with the good ones. Let's see, Claudia, is there an ideal, more effective way to approach an external recruiter or recruitment firm? So yeah, sort of going back to building relationships, right? Usually an external recruiter, especially if you have specialized skills, they will find you. And so part of the strategy for you as a candidate is to make yourself easily findable, right? And so LinkedIn is what comes to mind for me as a recruiter. I sort of use that as a database, so to speak, for talent. So making yourself easily searchable, easily findable on LinkedIn. And obviously that includes like just having a good LinkedIn resume, LinkedIn profile, but also being active on LinkedIn. So if you can create content around your area of expertise, that really positions you above a lot of other folks that don't. And it doesn't have to be super, like, you don't have to be trying to aspire to be like a LinkedIn influencer or anything like that. But if you write a post every now and then and make sure it's a thoughtful post, I mean, you can use ChatGPT to help you, but I wouldn't use it to write it for you. But yeah, if you position yourself as an authority in your space, that makes it much easier for you, for recruiters to find you. I mean, the other strategy too is to connect with recruiters through LinkedIn by interacting with their content, or hiring managers and interacting with their content. But more often than not, if a recruiter is not looking for you, it may be a bit of a uphill battle to develop a relationship with an external recruiter. And not to say you shouldn't. You definitely should try, but I would try to be pretty focused about it. Aquila, I hope I'm pronouncing that okay. I've observed a trend where organizations go through the hiring process for compliance, but often prioritize internal candidates for certain positions. I want to inquire about the best time to ask if there are internal candidates being considered for a role. That's a fair question. External recruiters might not be privy to that. But this does beg the question of like what kind of information you can glean from an external or an internal recruiter. It's sort of a meta question, right? Because usually when you go through an interview process and you talk with a recruiter, the time is pretty constrained. And a lot of time is really about either fielding the recruiter's questions or you asking the recruiter questions about the company. But to ask about the process is actually pretty important. And I would say 9 out of 10 people don't do that. So if you can inquire about the process, what I would say is try to learn about a few questions, right? Is how long has this position been open? Have they gone through previous rounds of cohorts to try to find this position or to try to fill this position? Because that's really telling. In fact, these are some of the questions that we ask as a third-party recruiter when a client is trying to engage us. It's like, how long has this been open? Where have they had any offer declines and why? Right? Because that could be telling about what stage they are in hiring. So for example, with a large company, sort of a backfill position, say a large company, maybe they have, I don't know, maybe they have 20 senior software engineers and now they're just looking for another one. Like they've hired for that position before. So they're very, I would argue that I would suspect that the interview process for that position is pretty refined, right? And so likelihood of you going into that and then finding what they need from a funnel is high probability. Now, if you contrast it with a company that is growing, maybe they're a startup, and they've never hired for an internal senior software engineer because they've always offshored, for example. There's going to be a learning curve on the employer side to figure out how to hire, and so they're going to have a few missteps. And so it's important to know that as a candidate, right? Like, have they hired for this position before, or is this a backfill? Why is this position open, right? Because it can help you set your expectations. And setting your expectations as a candidate, and this is part of the reason why I'm doing this whole coffee talk here. It's very important to set and manage your expectations, because if your expectations are not being met or there's a mismatch, it takes a huge toll on you as a job seeker emotionally, right? And you don't want to be putting all your energy on sort of just mismanaged expectations. And so hopefully that helps. Hearing beeping. It's 3:36. There are a bunch of questions in here, and I don't think we're going to be able to get through that. I do need to jump off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save these questions and I'll put them into some sort of file. And I'm going to be doing this every week. So I hope that you guys can join me here. And I hope this was helpful. I really appreciate the questions, because these are really nuanced questions. And I appreciate the nuanced situations. And hopefully this could be a little more interactive. I know it's hard with a large group, but I'm going to post this recording on YouTube. Check it out. There's an email that was sent, or I'll post it on that landing page that I created so that you guys can have access to that. Actually, it's in the chat here. What am I talking about? Okay, so if you scroll up to the top of the chat, there's a link there to the recordings, and I'll be posting them up. Appreciate you guys' time. If I'm doing this all for free, if you guys take any value from any of the stuff here, you can buy me a real coffee. There's a QR code or Venmo somewhere around here. But I would appreciate it. If not, no worries. I know it's tough right now, but keep your heads up. I'm here to help, and see you next week.